destruction doctrine preventing all-out warfare. Israel is a populous areas in nations they're fighting under mandatory evac mandate. Electromagnetic and space satellite warfare exploits, Nasrian groups in Israel, much unlike Golan and any one regional war only given the #S if forces at once engaging wherever weapons can reach and aren't intercepted. Keep reading, Year 2. Operation Sleepy Mercury in her hands. They planted 100 men and women deemed El Nutso positioned in planning room central. Writers, poets, engineers, scientists, producers of all sorts, the intelligence community, Nobel Prize winners, top-class ace summa cum laude kids, lawyers in him whose biggest brag was what maybe eluded the boast in the others whose prize merit achievement award was his framed equivalency document yet far from equal was he. A think tank whose task was simple, to create 1001 scenarios with the worst case scenario emphasis. 24 sleepless hours, as much internet access as desired providing it could penetrate and utilize that which could be channeled or pilfered through Arab and Far Eastern world's Confederate Ambassador and Guilford Winston Bates global control state apparatus and digital manifest interrupt and refurbished brand proliferating the dangerous efficacies of the day's newly learned truth codes that were hardwired inside. Even blank what might have derailed on the road on track of conventional thought and even inklings impulses that on a scale of inverted engineered means pummeled like never before the all that had ever been conventionally known or understood before. Inside of the mind is a sort of cattle branding iron to cartel what resonated of to the enemy as stuffy morality-centric convention and intellectuals platform building. What considerations we had in front of us was itself subject to litmus tests, all options considered only where all stratagem only one idea's fail-proof conclusion. And vice versa. What should only fail, that is, even meeting in the middle meant to fully traverse the hypothesis scale where any of all detours made their way back to the think tank's desired or undesired track. Shoe-fitting the conclusion was prohibited here and infraction makers whereby peers observed were subjected to only friendly ousting from this little society that could together save lives. The designated rods of theory should alongside other spokes generate and lead to a rounded wheel and the commodious road to evenly travel with all dips, potholes as authenticated as the means that themselves were hurled into the centrifuge of storm testing. As for logic defying where only superficially considered yet the subjectivity test exposed all variants that would otherwise if isolated be unto their own cycles of logic determinants, which thing, thus and such, etc., and to avoid exclamations of superfluidity of non-thought while sounding off with pretentiously exorbitant largesse contrarily via utterances without saying implicitly that you've quite the vol blowed. Would and couldn't be allowed to abet. Lazy thought, so a feudalist child's. Interpretation or design was encouraged. Planes that, again worst case scenario like that could have curtailed or prevented consequences or the very ACTS of terrorism in this case, could by the act of a deemed central figure who alone retains privy could be given to situation set saturation where they could as though at a button's push instantaneously explode. One such item was on the right side of the summary conclude portion of the equals sign. Let's begin. Sir, if we can do it with our own assets we could do it to theirs. We must of course sabotage what does present imminent threat to us. Question number 1 is easy, the answer is from the inside. And question number 2 is also evident to me, like energy to destroy like matter as a kind of vacuum that abhors a vacancy to be filled, or decimated. Computers built that can only be intercepted or invaded like a warfield and sophisticated high-priced military assets item that, say, when falling into enemies' hands can be like your team's tricky laptops connected to invisible fuses obliterated. Intelligence to obtain intelligence. Man's mind, you encourage stream of consciousness so I'll say exhibit flight 93 at this juncture, in the machine which constitutes the, I'll insert the centrifuge of the whimsical terrorist here, without the limitations pertaining to devastation manifest. The kid, well cripes, the guy's 5 years old, so, he was tersely interrupted with a rolling hands admonition that in unison with tongue said, you're choking it. Let's just get on with it. Instead of saying what was heard only inside of the mind in, shall we? The speakerman only abruptly looked at his watch Atavich Venbov his bent and extended arm, our man given the floor doubtful that the overhead clock hadn't the sufficient information, he quickly resumed with a gesture of both dignified apology and distinguished acquiescence, an important detail as the parting gift from Tehran and merits again, as do you. Mr. Prime Minister, an exceptions interest category as a plotting intelligence fence erector, interrupted with Mr. Committee Charge who'd only ever explicitly say that brevity was and still is the soul of wit. Here we go again. Speakerman's objector, upon hearing recent news from the battlefield instead of mal affected his flush evidence to tedious annoyance and, as though beyond encumbersome's trying red-faced vexing strangulation point. He gasped before interjecting, again, information that's restricted to this room. You don't want him knocking at your door or, hey, consideration point, selling you your next explodable pager contract. Ha ha, his pleasure was to revel in the thought regarding this detail made factual expressly by not this panel but in what media had admitted to for them. The Prime Minister lowered his eyes to ask the desk phone intercom that looked like it had just lowered from Mars, isn't that right, Ms. V? That's right. Burning the midnight oil well beyond what the candle wick can handle so wouldn't be particularly overjoyed about red-eye flighting it from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. A little too close to home here in smoking evidence as the reason for the calling for the meeting of the minds here, and of course I can neither confirm or deny the charge, Mr. Prime Minister. Remember, he turned in his chair to square with the noted lawyer, where there's subjected irrelevancy to do something other than to qualify a yet validated point, spurious here as it is beyond us and for others provable and tangibly extendable for forum, it must be by the wayside cast. Go on. If you put off the infraction, I'll put off the overruling. Israel's Prime Minister Itzhak Mordecai Rosen, lawyer, then judge and then elected leader of state and nation, who was stately intelligent in his manner of appearance and woundingly empirical in his elocution and whose every word compelled the ear, he simply said, Point A, our subject header operation slippery mercury in her hands. Point B, her objectives to our own, and C, what utilization per resource ability per man capita output can we expect? As to your satellite reference, it isn't about elusively where, 'tis more so a matter of what's been done by man that can be undone by man, whereas the miraculous outside of man that certainly Israel has seen in the past, tell me who in the planning room can conceptualize even such a thing? Like this that we have seen? Unimaginable whether you have the brightest minds accomplished and sequestered to a think tank forum or not. Go on and conclude for me, Jonah. Okay, the encampments erected by them.